Welcome back to our video tutorial series on the Precision Hub Stands Porsche Pro package. So just to recap of what we've talked about so far, we've mounted the car on hub stands, set it down on the leveling pads, installed the lockout plates, and we've set ride height. So now we're going to get into caster and camber. And so the first thing we'll do is we'll show the two different locations that you can measure caster and camber on the Precision Hub Stands, and then get into making adjustments. So let's get after it. Let's dig into checking caster and camber at the Precision Hub Stands. So there are two options. The first is the center hub itself. This is typically the best option as it's the closest to the source. However, if you don't have access to the center hub, maybe you have a center lock car, or you have a car that has an axle stub that sticks out enough that it interferes with the caster camber gauge. In that case, we always include the magnetic caster camber gauge adapters. So these just have a bolt on the back side and they thread in and tighten up against the hub stands themselves. Both are valid locations to check caster and camber. So with the caster camber gauge, we've already calibrated it. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and turn it on. Get that turned on. There we go. And we'll place it on the center hub. So this one we're right at 2 degrees of negative camber. So what we want, our plan is to put 2.5 degrees of negative camber on the front and 2 degrees on the rear for a pretty like 3/4 street, 1/4 track alignment. So what we need now is another 1/2 degree of camber. And in Porsches with adjustable lower control arms, we need a 5mm shim to make up that difference. So now what we're going to do is we're going to pick the car up with the quick jacks, loosen 2 bolts underneath on the control arm, add this 5mm shim in, put it back together, and then check caster and camber. Okay, so here we are under the car. We picked the car up off the leveling pads and we removed the lockout plates. That way with the quick jacks we ensure that we don't have some interference there since the quick jacks move the car fore and aft. So here is the lower control arm. We use RSS's lower control arms. So here is where it connects to the frame itself. Here's the control arm part that connects to the knuckle. And in between is a series of spacers to set camber. And under there are 2 bolts, and these 2 bolts retain this whole system. So we're going to loosen those nuts off the studs. We're going to separate the lower control arm from the inner part, install another shim in there, and then bolt it all back together again. And there we go, shim is in. So now we're going to tighten these up, and these torque to 16 foot-pounds according to RSS. So we're going to do that, and then we'll recheck the camber, and then we're going to do the other side as well, as they both measured the same. And there we go. So we've got that 5mm shim in there, and we've got it all torqued back up. So we'll remove the other side, we'll do the other side, and then we'll set the car back down and check the camber. So here you can see with that 5mm shim, we brought it up to 2.5 degrees of negative camber, and we're showing it at the lower magnetic caster camber gauge attachment point. We did the same thing on the other side. So we've got 2.5 negative on this side, 2.5 negative on that side, and now we're going to shift to the back of the car and check the back of the car. The rear uses an eccentric to adjust if you don't have the aftermarket lower control arm, so it's slightly simpler. So here we are at the rear of the car. We've got the caster camber gauge magnetically attached to the magnetic caster camber gauge mount adapter. And we're sitting right at 2.1 degrees of camber. To be honest, I'm going to leave it. Why? Well, it's a 0.1 difference, and we still have to adjust toe, so I won't be surprised if a small toe adjustment impacts the camber enough to bring this either into spec or push it further out, and then we'll make our adjustment. But we will show the eccentric and how to adjust camber on the rear of 981s. So this is the rear control arm on our 981 Cayman S. And as you can see up here, there's a bolt that has some graduations around it and an offset washer. It's actually called an eccentric bolt. So what this does is as you rotate it, it'll push or pull the control arm in and out. We're not going to adjust it because we're already pretty much right to where we want it to be, but what we'll do is we'll talk about it. So here you would have a nut on the back side. We'd loosen that nut, and you can turn this eccentric and watch the caster camber gauge live until you get the camber that you're after, and then you just tighten it back down. The only impacts later on you'd have are adjusting toe may have an impact on your camber, as everything kind of affects everything else. So what we'll do now is we will move to the front and we'll check caster, which will involve installing the laser alignment system. So just a quick recap of everything we've done so far in this video. We set camber to 2.5 degrees on the front, utilizing shims on the lower control arms. And in the rear, we checked camber to 2.1 degrees. We're shooting for 2 degrees, but we're gonna leave it for now and just see how it develops after we adjust toe. So now we're moving into setting caster. And in caster, we utilize a wheel turning sweep to measure the change of angle to find caster. So that requires our laser alignment system to measure that 15 degrees of turn each way. So now we're gonna dig into the laser alignment system, installing it and utilizing the caster prism. Installing the laser alignment system is pretty simple. So the laser alignment system itself will bolt to its laser alignment system mount utilizing the thumb screw, and these match, so right front to right front. To install these, the thumb screws just go into the laser alignment system mount, and they thread right into the mount plates. There we go, there's one. And there we go, laser alignment system installed. Next, we're going to move into setting the offset to make the laser alignment systems at the front and the back the same width. To set the laser alignment system offsets to make the front width the same as the back width, we're going to use one of our Starrett tape measures, and we're going to go under this laser alignment system mount onto the other side. So we'll rotate the laser alignment system itself out of the way. There we go. So we just point it down, and this tape measure goes right into the mount itself and then off to the other side. And on the other side, there is a magnetic attachment to hold the tape measure in place. So we'll set this down here for now. We'll go to the other side. We'll install the head of the tape measure into the laser alignment system mount. Go. And depending on where the precision hub stands are sitting on the leveling pad, the leveling poles may interfere with the tape measure, so it's easier just to remove them since we're not using them anymore anyway. So we'll take this measurement down to the laser alignment system mount, and on the front we are at 1785, so 1,785 millimeters. So now we're going to repeat that same measurement on the back and find the difference. All right, so on the rear of the car we have 1726, and on the front of the car we have 1785, and that difference is 59 millimeters. So there's a 59 millimeter difference between the front track width and the rear track width. So since the front is wider, we have to bring the rear out, and that's split side to side. So 59 millimeters divided by 2 is 29.5 millimeters. So we will split the difference between the 30 and the 29 mark on the graduations on the laser alignment system. So what we'll do is we'll slide this out, loosening the thumb screws in the back until we get to 29.5, and then we'll tighten it down. And now we're going to do the same thing on the left side, and then we're going to turn all the laser alignment systems on and look at our caster measurement. So back to the rear, now we have the laser alignment system turned on, and you can see that our toe value is significantly out. We're up to 5 millimeters of toe in the front, which isn't what we want. That's due to the camber change that we made with the shims. They pushed the toe out. So what we're going to do now is we don't need to make a toe adjustment. We'll follow that in the next video. But to make the caster adjustment, we have to turn the wheel 15 degrees each way. And so this is going to be our reference mark, the 5 millimeters of toe in. So now we're going to transition to the front. We'll show installing the caster prism and rotating the wheel to get the laser line back to its reference position. Now we're back to the front right position, as you can see here. And we're going to have a couple of back and forth as we show some different angles. So right now we have the laser alignment system turned on and installed, and that's the line we showed at the 5 millimeter mark on the rear. So what we're going to do is we have the caster prism. So this is a prism that deflects the laser line 15 degrees each way with arrows denoting which direction it goes. So following the caster camber gauge instructions right here, we need to turn, since we're on the right side, the wheel 15 degrees to the right to start. So what we'll do is we'll install the caster prism to move the laser line 15 degrees in the direction needed to turn the wheel to the right. So we'll install it pointing to the right of the car. And so as we turn the wheel to the right, this will come back onto the grid plate. So now we'll transition to the rear of the car, and we'll show as the laser line moves across the grid plate. Now we're back to the right rear of the car, and as you can see, the laser line is no longer showing on the laser alignment system. This is because it's deflected 15 degrees away from the car. So now we're going to go in the car and we're going to turn the wheel until the laser line goes back to the 5 millimeters of toe in mark, and that will designate that we've turned the wheel 15 degrees. So let's go ahead and do that. There we go, and now we've got the laser line back to the 5 millimeter mark. So we're going to lock the steering wheel in place with the steering wheel lock, and now we're going to transition back to the caster camber gauge to show the caster camber gauge instructions. So now we're back to the front of the car. We have the caster camber gauge leveled with the little level that's built into it. And now we're going to turn it on, following Longacre's instructions. We're going to push the caster button, which will cause the display to flash. There it goes, the display is flashing. And we press the 0 button. And now what we're going to do is flip the caster prism on the laser alignment system to deflect the laser line the opposite direction, and then turn the wheel until we get the laser line back to the 5 millimeters of toe in mark. So we've got the caster prism, we just turn it around, it magnetically attaches, bam. And now we're going to get back in the car and turn the wheel until we get to that mark again. All right, so we've completed our 30 degrees of total wheel sweep, and now we get the caster readout on the caster camber gauge. We're shooting for about 7. More importantly, we want the left to right side to be equal, and right now we have 7.2 degrees of caster. If we wanted to make a change, we would go into the lower control arm, and there's a caster puck that we can turn to adjust caster, and that's only available on aftermarket arms and some GT cars. In this case, 7.2, we'll see what the other side looks like, and if both sides are pretty close to each other, we're going to leave it. So now we've checked caster in the front right, as we showed in the video before this, in the front left off video. The front right measures 7.2 and the front left measures 7.1, so we're just going to leave them where they're at. If we needed to make a change, we would adjust the pucks in the lower control arms, which is an aftermarket thing, or some of the newer GT cars feature it. And if we did make that change to caster, we would probably have to go in and make a camber change as well, as every adjustment affects another adjustment. So just to recap up to this point, put the car in hub stands, set it down on leveling pads, we've checked the ride height, we've set the camber, and we've checked the caster and didn't need to make any adjustments. So in the next video, we're going to check toe utilizing our laser alignment system, and we've already halfway there setting up the laser alignment system to check caster. So we'll see you in the next video. Thanks.